Hey guys, welcome back. Today, we're talking about something super interesting. Why is it that so many people find it hard to think in English or reply quickly, even when they understand what's being said?
Yeah, good question. It's like, you know the words, you get what people are saying, but then it feels like your brain freezes up when you want to respond.
And one thing we've noticed is that a lot of English learners spend years on grammar when they start learning. They're studying rules, but they're barely speaking. So, why does that happen?
Right. Think about it. Babies don't start with grammar books. They just listen and try out sounds until they make sense. So, if you start learning like a baby, you can start to think and respond naturally in English too. Sounds kinda magical, right?
Totally. So, what's the secret here? What do babies do differently from adults when learning a language? Or, do you think you're smarter than a baby? Well, we're about to spill those secrets in today's episode.
But first, Noah, here's a fun question for you and our dear listeners. How many English words do you think you need to know to master everyday conversation? Here are the options: 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000 words.
I'd say around 3,000 words. That sounds like a good number to cover most situations.
Well, good guess. We'll reveal the answer at the end of the episode, so stick around. All right, so let's talk about some common mistakes beginners make when learning English. One big one is spending too much time on grammar, especially in the early stages.
Oh yeah, and this is something that comes up a lot, especially in schools and textbooks. They're always pushing grammar rules from day one.
Right. You open a textbook and boom, grammar rules right in your face. But honestly, that's not how we naturally learn a language.
Think about it. Babies don't start with grammar lessons. They don't know what a verb or a noun is, they just hear how people speak. It's all about absorbing the language first.
And when beginners focus too much on grammar, it can actually slow them down. Grammar can be complicated and even frustrating. Sometimes people feel like they're stuck because they're too worried about getting every rule perfect.
Yeah, and that frustration can make people lose motivation. I mean, who wants to be memorizing rules instead of actually talking? It's like trying to solve a puzzle instead of just having a conversation.
So here's what beginners should do. Don't stress about grammar at the start. Instead, focus on listening and understanding how phrases flow together. Trust that you'll pick up on the patterns naturally, just like a baby does.
Yeah, think of it as absorbing the language. The grammar will come to you over time, once you're used to how sentences sound in real life. And honestly, you'll find that a lot of grammar just starts to make sense once you've heard enough English.
Totally. Let grammar take a backseat for now. In real conversations, it's way more important to understand and respond than to have perfect grammar.
So that's one big mistake, over-focusing on grammar. Now let's move on to another one, which is skipping listening practice. This is a big one too.
Yep, babies spend months just listening before they even try to say a word. They're constantly observing and picking up on sounds, rhythms, and context.
But in many language classes, there's not enough focus on listening. Students end up jumping straight into speaking and writing exercises without spending enough time just listening to how English really sounds.
And when you skip listening practice, you miss out on some essential parts of language, like pronunciation, intonation, and even body language if you're watching conversations.
Right. And without that foundation, speaking can feel awkward because you don't have a natural feel for how sentences flow. Listening gives you that sense of rhythm and context.
So for beginners out there, we can't stress this enough. Make listening a daily habit. It doesn't have to be serious study. You could listen to podcasts, watch shows, or even just play English music in the background.
Yeah, just let English surround you. The more you listen, the easier it gets to understand and pick up new words and phrases. It'll help you start thinking in English too.
So instead of diving into grammar, spend that time listening. Treat it like you're immersing yourself in the language, just like a baby would.
Speaking of immersing, Another secret of babies' language learning is repetition and imitation.
Yes. Babies learn by hearing the same words and phrases over and over. They repeat what they hear and mimic the sounds, even if they're not perfect at first.
Exactly. So for anyone learning English, don't be afraid to repeat what you hear. If you're watching a show or a YouTube video, try pausing it, repeating what they just said, and then listening again to compare.
That's such a good tip. And if you want to get really serious about it, try recording yourself when you mimic. Then listen to your recording and compare it to the original. You'll catch little details, like the intonation or rhythm.
Yes, this helps you notice where your pronunciation is different from a native speaker's. You'll start hearing the small things that make English sound more natural.
Here's another tool you can use: daily dictation. We're putting the link in the episode description. It's a free website with tons of dictation exercises. You listen to a sentence, write it down, and then check your answer.
That's such a helpful exercise. With dictation, you're training both your listening and writing skills. And since you're writing what you hear, you'll get better at recognizing common phrases and sounds.
Right. Plus, it builds up your vocabulary and helps you understand how words are pronounced in real conversations. It's also a low-pressure way to practice without needing a speaking partner.
So to sum this part up, don't just read textbooks. Mimic the sounds, repeat the phrases you hear, and make it a habit to listen and repeat every day.
The first vocabulary is rhythm. Rhythm is the pattern or flow of sounds in speech or music. In language, it's the way words and sentences rise and fall as people speak. Paying attention to rhythm helps you sound more natural. Example: when you listen to native English speakers, try to feel the rhythm of their speech.
Absorb. To absorb something means to take it in fully. When you absorb language, you're letting it sink in naturally without forcing yourself to memorize rules. Example: if you read in English every day, you'll start to absorb new words without even trying.
Intonation. Intonation is similar to rhythm, but it helps express feelings, questions, or statements. For example, notice the intonation in English questions. The voice often rises at the end.
Mimic. To mimic means to copy or imitate someone's behavior or way of speaking. Here is an example sentence. Kids often mimic their parents' speech patterns when they're learning to talk.
All right, let's talk about responding like a baby. This one's really simple but super effective.
Yes. Think about how babies start talking. They don't use perfect sentences. They just say a word or two to get their point across.
They might say milk when they want milk, or ball when they want to play. They just go for it, even if it's not perfect.
So for English learners, you can start the same way. Use basic responses in conversations. You don't have to worry about saying a long, perfect sentence.
Right. Just start with a word or a short phrase. If someone asks, "How's your day?" you could just say, "Good," or "Pretty good." That's enough to keep the conversation going.
And as you get comfortable, you can add a little more each time. Like, "Good, I went to the park today." You're slowly building up your confidence.
Exactly. The key is not to let fear hold you back. A lot of people are afraid to speak because they think they'll make mistakes or sound silly.
But the truth is, if you start with simple replies, you'll realize that most people just want to understand you. They're not judging your English.
Yes. And honestly, simple responses are completely normal in everyday English. We don't always use long sentences, even as native speakers.
Right. So, if you're learning, try to respond with whatever you feel comfortable with. Just like a baby, open your mouth and go for it.
That's the best advice. Don't overthink it. All right, Noah, what's the next tip?
Well, next one is really fun. When you're learning a new language, having a parent figure can really make a difference. Just like babies have parents who talk to them and correct them gently, language learners can benefit from someone who acts like that, a native speaker or a patient teacher.
How can someone find their own parent figure for learning English?
Good question. There are a few ways. One easy option is to look for a language exchange partner. This is someone who speaks English and wants to learn your language, so you can teach each other. Or if you want something more structured, you could find a tutor who's comfortable correcting you gently and speaking in a natural, simple way.
Oh, that sounds helpful. And why is it so effective to have a parent figure?
Well, think about it. When you have someone who's patient and speaks simply, you don't feel as pressured. They guide you, just like a parent would, and you feel safe to make mistakes. They can also help you with correct pronunciation and give you tips in a way that's easy to understand.
That's true. Plus, they can give you real-time feedback, which is hard to get when you're practicing on your own.
Yeah. By the way, we talked about how to find the language partner for free in our last episode, and we put the link in the description, so go check it out.
Awesome. All right, what's our final tip for learning like a baby?
The last one is to narrate your day.
Narrate your day? Can you explain that a bit more?
Of course. So babies are constantly hearing people narrate what's going on around them. Like, we're putting on shoes, or look at the dog. They hear this all day, and it helps them understand the language in context. We can do the same thing by narrating our own actions in English, even if we're just talking to ourselves.
I like that. So if I'm making coffee, I could say, I'm making coffee. Or if I'm walking outside, I could say, it's sunny today. Simple things like that.
Remember just simple sentences. It's a great way to practice forming sentences and using everyday vocabulary. Plus, it gets you in the habit of thinking in English.
That's really smart. And I guess over time, you get used to describing your environment and your actions, so it starts to feel more natural.
Yes, exactly. You're building your vocabulary without sitting down to memorize lists. And you're practicing grammar naturally, just by forming sentences as you go through your day.
So, narrating your day is like sneaking in practice throughout your routine without it feeling like study time.
And it's effortless practice. You're already doing these things, so why not talk about them in English?
Great tip, Noah. I think that's a perfect one to end on. Simple, practical, and something anyone can start right away.
Narrate. To narrate is to describe or talk about what's happening, often by telling a story or explaining events as they occur. Example, try narrating your day in English, like saying I'm cooking dinner or I'm walking to the store.
Memorize. To learn something so well that you can remember it without needing to look at it again. Example, instead of just memorizing vocabulary lists, try using those words in sentences so they stick better.
Sneaking. Sneaking means doing something secretly, or to slip something in without making it obvious. Example, you can sneak in English practice by describing what you're doing as you go through your day.
Overthink. Think too much or worry too much about something, often making it feel more complicated or difficult than it is. Example, don't overthink it. Just try speaking even if you make mistakes.
Before we go, let's reveal the answer to our quiz question from the start of the episode. We asked, what's the minimum number of English vocabulary words you need to understand around 90% of everyday conversations? I'm going to guess 3,000 words.
Ooh, close, but actually it's just 2,000 words.
Really? Only 2,000? I thought you'd need way more than that to understand most conversations.
I know, it's surprising, but research shows that around 2,000 words cover about 90% of the vocabulary used in everyday conversations. These are the most commonly used words, so mastering them helps you get by in most situations.
That's actually super encouraging. I guess it means you don't have to overwhelm yourself with every word in the dictionary.
Sure, those 2,000 words can get you really far. Of course, if you want to talk about a specific topic, like medicine or technology, you'll need to pick up extra vocabulary in that area. But for day-to-day chats, 2,000 words are enough to connect with people.
That's awesome. It really takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
Yes, keep practicing, enjoy the process, and remember, learn like a baby. We'll see you next time with more tips to help you on your English journey.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.